Pat Martino is famous for weaving beautiful bob lines through the chord changes with some surprising twists and turns. In this video I'm going to take a look at a few examples from his solo on the Benny Golson tune Along Came Betty. I'm going to talk about some of the building blocks that he's using, what makes up those building blocks, and I'm also going to talk about how he's using them to create a musical whole in his solo by tying them together in different ways. My name is Larsen. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar and use that to make music, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to make sure not to miss anything, then click the little bell notification icon next to the subscribe button. Pat Martino is playing Along Came Betty in a double time samba feel, and I've written it out according to the feel that they're playing. So that means that everything that you see, if you already know the song, then everything appears to be twice as long. So what would usually be 1 bar of B flat minor in the beginning is in fact 2 bars of B flat minor in the way that they're playing it. The song Along Came Betty is sort of a transitional piece where we have sort of the transition from going from bebop and standard harmony and really tonal harmony, and then moving towards more and more modal harmony. So essentially in the key of A flat major, but it is really also moving around the place, and there are a lot of different places where you don't really know what is going on, but most things are still tied together with pretty sort of tonal progressions in terms of 2/5s and 2/5/1s. The first example is the beginning of the solo, and Pat Martino starts in a way that's typical for him, at least as far as I know, with a really high energy pickup. So the pickup is on B minor E7, and he's actually he's just starting really on the 1 of that change, and the line that he's playing is really coming more out of B minor, I think. So first an F sharp minor triad, and then a scale one with a little chromaticism, and then what is essentially just a descending B minor 11 or B minor 9 arpeggio. Then he moves to the first bar in the actual solo, and here he kind of takes it down a little bit because he also needs to have something to build from. So he's playing over the B flat minor, and then it's shifting up to B minor, and in the song it's really B minor E7, but it really is just the move between those 2 minor chords. That's also pretty much what he's playing in the solo throughout. And what he does here in the beginning is that he first plays a phrase that's really just coming out of an F minor triad, moving that up to the next chord, so that's just F sharp minor, and keeping the same type of melody but changing the rhythm and sort of developing that a little bit, but still keeping it kind of calm. Down back to the B flat minor, and then on the B minor E7. So here at this point in the song the chords are going to move on to other chords, to an A major 7, and he repeats the phrase that he's using in the pickup. So we're kind of tying back to what he really started the solo with this phrase. So the F sharp minor triad, and then the chromatic leading note scale one, but since it's going to A major, he now alters the E7 and then resolves that to A major 7, and then we get sort of this F sharp minor 9 arpeggio descending as a phrase or as a line on the A major. This is also typical because you will see he talks about in videos that I've seen and also interviews how he's usually thinking from minor chords on all the chords here, and you can kind of see that with a phrase like this, that he is probably thinking F sharp minor on this A major 7. In the first example, we saw how Pat Martino was repeating phrases and developing phrases to tie things together over several bars, and also sort of tying together different parts of the solo, so the pickup with a later phrase. And in this example, he is doing something similar, but now he's using it not so much to just tie together the larger context, but also to help transition from one chord to the next. So in this part of the song, this is a few bars later, and it's the same chord progressions as in the beginning, but it's transposed. So now it's on F sharp minor moving up to G minor C7, and the F sharp minor line just starts with this descending pattern. So kind of like a Coltrane pattern in F sharp. Then we get an encircling of the F sharp, and then up, sort of this other Coltrane pattern, this A Coltrane pattern, and then we get this leading note to the 9th. And this is also something that's quite typical for Pat Martino to do. You really have this very clear, because this note is really on the beat, and it really doesn't, I mean, it's not so nice against the chord, but it's also resolved. And this way of using a leading note up to the 9th is something that he does quite a lot. He does it twice in this example, for instance. So we have this leading note up to the 9th, and then this small phrase he's actually just using to transition up to G minor, because he plays exactly the same phrase. And then here he moves down to sort of play the same type of phrase, but then descending, and in that way tying together the change from F sharp minor to G minor C7. Then on C7 he continues, and then he's actually going back to F sharp minor a bit early, and then using an A minor 7 arpeggio, well, a 9 arpeggio actually, chromaticism, and then this C sharp, which is kind of like an octave displaced version of this. This is what you would expect there, but then what he plays is the C sharp low, so he's moving the C sharp down an octave. This third example is in the same spot in the progression as the second example. It's just one chorus later. And here we have one of the things that you also find Pat Martino doing really often, because we're on a minor chord and he's sort of mixing the sound of sort of the Dorian sound and also the melodic minor sound together on top of a minor chord. The first part of this phrase is really using sort of a melodic minor sound. He starts on the 5th. So that's really just coming out of that F sharp melodic minor. And then moving to Dorian, here using again, kind of coming out of that Coltrane, major Coltrane pattern on A. And then moving to G minor. And here, he's kind of using what I would consider a Wes Montgomery quote, which is likely he checked out a lot of Wes Montgomery. And then running down the scale with a leading note. More encircling. So first on the G minor we have the leading note, the B leading note to the B flat. Once he's on the B flat, this is on the C7. We get an enclosure around the 5th of that chord, so around the G. And then down to F here. Up to, skipping up to a D. And then moving on here. And here we get a phrase which is exactly the same as in the second example. So he's playing really exactly the same line, and actually also the same on the first part of the G minor. And then we get a different phrase on the C7 here, taking us to the F major, and here we get first the Coltrane pattern, so descending Coltrane pattern on F, and then a phrase which is an F major 7 arpeggio, like this, and then moving chromatically from E down to the 7th down to the 5th C, something that I really connect with George Benson and Charlie Parker, and probably George Benson learned this from Charlie Parker. And then we get the descending Coltrane pattern. The reason that I can keep on publishing videos every week is that there is a community of people over on Patreon that are supporting the channel. I'm very grateful for their support. It's because of them that I can keep on making all these jazz guitar and music theory videos. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. And if you join us over on Patreon, I can also give you something in return for your support. It is interesting to see that Pat Martino is pretty much note for note repeating a phrase that is this long in the solo. But at the same time, I think when he's constructing lines, I think he is really thinking in certain building blocks that he's putting together And that does kind of lend itself to doing stuff like this. And it is also worth noticing that, in fact, the phrase that he's repeating here is also one of the phrases that I would consider sort of a signature Pat Martino phrase. So of course it's a huge part of his style to play exactly these types of lines. Pat Martino uses really a lot of polyrhythms and odd note groupings in his solos. This example really illustrates that because that's what he's doing at the end of the example. The first part of the example is kind of Pat Martino's take on the Honeysuckle Rose lick. And usually when we hear that, in this case, so this is on a B flat minor, you would expect to hear this phrase. What he does is, and then instead of playing an F minor triad here, he actually plays an F minor pentatonic phrase, so adding a leading note down the scale and then transitioning up to the B minor. On the B minor we get a phrase that's actually similar to the phrase that he's using on F sharp minor in some of the other examples. So first an encircling on the root, and then again the leading note up to the ninth. And then he's using that in the next part where it goes back to the B flat minor. We get a phrase that is dotted quarter note phrase. So he's playing, essentially the phrase is that he's playing one quarter note and then one eighth note. Like this, and then that way playing through an arpeggio and then moving on top of the meter. And then to go on to the next chord, he plays the high note again and then plays the same rhythm and actually also the same arpeggio on the B minor, but now it's changed, so it's moved an eighth note and he's starting on the one instead of on the one end. So, and goes on a bit further. And what is interesting about this is that the phrase that we hear at the end on the B minor is actually the way that he's usually using this phrase, but the first one is exactly the same phrase except it's shifted an eighth note. So that's a very nice effect to have, that you first get the phrase shifted and then you return it to where you expect to hear it. That's also the way he's using this phrase in the solo from Just Friends, which I made another video on. And if you want to check out that video where I'm analyzing some of his phrases on Just Friends and talk about how he's constructing those using some interesting chromatic turns and also some nice rhythmical ideas, then check out this video. If you want to learn more about jazz guitar, then subscribe to my channel. If you want to help me keep making videos, then check out my Patreon page. That's about it for this time. Thank you for watching, and until next time.